Separated by cosmic cabinets, Brandon, Paul, and Logan are broadcasting the Breakdown Podcast live using their telepathic powers. My name is Brandon Miracle, broadcasting live from the Break Room Arcade. If you look south of me in the video version, you'll see the beautiful face of Paul Anderson broadcasting live from the Break Room Clubhouse. If you look to the right of me in the video version, you'll see the beautiful face of Logan Welliver broadcasting live from the Break Room Bedroom. On today's episode, recorded on April 20th, 2018, we'll be talking about the possibilities for Pokemon on the Nintendo Switch. We'll also be talking about My Hero Academia once again, Shokugeki no Soma. Paul's been playing the Uncharted series. We'll also be comparing that to Tomb Raider later in today's episode. So there's a lot to look forward to. Welcome, guys. It's been a good week for us, I think.
Yeah, it's been a really good week.
If you were here yesterday, we were talking with Roger's Base about our Nintendo E3 predictions. That was a lot of fun.
Yes.
Thanks again, Roger, for being there for us to talk, because it was a great time. So, guys, Pokemon rumors are just starting to flood the internet at an alarming rate. You'll remember what I posted in our chat yesterday about
Pokemon potentially releasing in November.
In November, yes. I went to that guy's Twitter and I just started looking around, and he had a bet for like 30 days that would get information about Pokemon. The 30 days had already expired because that tweet was posted on April 13th, and no one reported on it until yesterday. So I'm pretty sure he was just full of it, and there's no real information, and he may have made that up. As far as Pokemon releasing in November, that's exactly when I think it will happen. So there is some credibility there, because I think it's just a safe bet.
It seems very plausible. Like, if I had to guess offhand, like November 2018 would be the safest bet for Pokemon for Switch.
Yeah, you want that in that holiday slot. It'll have been out. It'll be out 2 months after the Nintendo Switch Online service, which I think is going to be very important to this Pokemon game.
Hopefully.
And Pokemon in the holiday slot, man. You're talking like ending a second year on Switch. That's how you do it. That's how you make the money.
That's installing a money printer at Nintendo headquarters. That's how you make money.
They're gonna replace that old GIF of the Nintendo DS printing money. Now it's just gonna be a Switch printing money instead. We'll finally have gotten past that.
If they haven't yet, they should have. Like, that should have already been a thing a long time ago.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Pokemon yesterday. We're going to get quite a bit deeper into it today. First of all, is this even going to resemble what we know as a Pokemon game? They did say it was going to be a core Pokemon RPG, and I guess the assumption that we all have is that this will be Generation 8. Yesterday, Roger did mention that there's a lot of rumblings going on that this will be considered a reboot of the series, and it might harken back to Red and Blue. Where do you guys stand on that?
I remember hearing that before, but I thought recently it was confirmed that it would be Gen 8 or to be Gen 8, or I thought there was like more concrete sentiment that this was just Gen 8. This wasn't a reboot.
I do recall hearing that recently as well. I'll have to Google search to figure out where that came from. But yeah, as much as I'd like to see kind of like a harkening back to Red and Blue, I don't think that necessarily makes sense for this.
Yeah.
People are looking forward with Pokemon. They're not really looking backward right now. Obviously, there's a lot of fans of Gen 1 like us, but that doesn't mean that's where I want to be for the rest of the series. I want Pokemon to excel. I want it to move forward. Show me how it moves forward first, and then apply that to the series going backward.
Honestly, they're in a very interesting position where, like I was saying yesterday, I really do want a Gen 1 remake. I think of all the gens, like, that's the one that like stopped at the GBA and hasn't gotten anything past that point. At least, like, I think it was Diamond and Pearl were DS to begin with.
Yeah.
And so they were probably, to a point, like, they're modern enough for me. But like Fire Red and Leaf Green, I can't play that anymore. I have no technology to play that. And so, part of me really wants that to be remade. For me personally, I think if the Pokemon game for the Switch is Gen 8, which makes the most sense to me, I think that they honestly should put a Gen 1 remake on the 3DS if they're looking to kind of give more life to that console and keep it going. Not that I want that. It's just, to me, that makes the most sense.
If that were to happen, I could see that coming out in November and Pokemon Switch not being out until 2019. If they're going to do a Gen 1 remake, and if it were to be headed for 3DS, I think it would be suicide necessarily to release that after a Switch Generation 8 game.
Yeah, I hope Nintendo doesn't do that to the Switch, because I think after they announced that, Switch is getting a mainline Pokemon game, that was it. Like, their 3DS isn't getting any more games. We're done with the 7th generation. We got Sun and Moon. We got Ultra Sun. We got Ultra Moon. It's time to move on from the 3DS. Obviously, the developers are moving on. We're going to the Switch. I think in terms of the prospect of a reboot, maybe Gen 1, maybe not, I don't think we'll see like a hard reboot by any means. If anything, we'll see like a soft reboot like we've seen with the recent God of War. It's like, okay, so we're going to call it something like this, something really simple, something familiar. And, but we're going to kind of like revisiting a lot of the things that made like the first generation so special, while infusing that with some of the newer ideas and then also with some brand new ideas. Maybe they revisit that region, maybe they just call it, what's the first region called? Kanto. Okay, I can't believe it. I feel like I should have remembered that. I'm not a huge Pokemon fan, but I'm a Pokemon fan. So, yeah, I can imagine them just going back and saying like, okay, we're gonna revisit the Kanto region, but then like it feeling familiar in a lot of ways, but then also feeling very foreign in a lot of ways. And then again, just building that in a 3D space.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, we're moving away from the 3DS. We're moving away from a very, very underpowered handheld that was underpowered when it launched, and we're moving to something that is much more capable. And so I'm anticipating a lot of changes in presentation, and I'd like them to pull back a lot of the fancier stuff, and just strip it back to just pure Pokemon, and then explore ways of integrating new experiences that aren't so grandiose and feel out of place and temporary. So obviously, with X and Y, we had the Mega Evolutions, which I think work. And then we have Sun and Moon, which added the Z moves. And that especially kind of felt like a big stretch. It didn't feel sustainable. It felt like that's generation's gimmick, Mm-hmm. So I'd like to see stuff that just feels really at home in the Pokemon universe. Like, Pokemon Ami, introduced in X and Y.
It's good that you bring that up, because one of the ways that I want to see them expand on the way that we play Pokemon is in the adventure itself. You look at the anime, and Ash and his friends are always, exploring the land, and, they're getting lost and everything like that. Well, with the release of games like Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey, I'd like to see Pokemon maybe take the adventuring aspect to more an explorative direction. Maybe you don't exactly have a direction. You're trying to get to a town because maybe there's a gym there, there's some goal, there's a reason you want to be there, but you don't know how to get there. So there's a big forest in front of you. Let's get away from looking down on top of the action. Let's get behind the character's head in a third-person view, and give me the ability to climb rocks and jump over things. Let's explore the world a little bit. Make some of those Pokemon interactions a little bit more organic. I don't want to just randomly encounter a Pokemon. I want to see a Pokemon, run up to it, and decide that I want that encounter to take place.
Yeah, actually, that's a really interesting proposition. Could you imagine them implementing certain types of moves? So instead of oh, I'm going to use the fly move to get to previous towns. Like, no, you're actually like initiating some sort of action with whatever Pokemon you're using to
jump
fly.
on its back and fly there a little faster.
Yeah, and then maybe it's an interactive
every
experience.
kid's dream come true.
You know? Maybe while you're flying, you're having encounters with certain Pokemon. Maybe it's not like something where it's just a random encounter, like you don't see anything and all of a sudden there's this transition screen and you hear the battle music. Maybe there's actual Pokemon on the map that are hiding in bushes and all of a sudden one jumps out at you and you're like, ah, crap, and then the battle music starts and it's very organic how that happens. Like presentation.
Can you imagine like that combined with like what people were saying about Detective Pikachu and how much like world building that game does and how you just kind of encounter Pokemon just kind of naturally in the world. Yeah. Imagine if they implemented that into it where you're actually finding, like in the anime that, bug Pokemon where you find them up in the trees. Imagine having to climb a tree in order to find a bug type Pokemon.
That'd be awesome.
I think the one thing that would need to be there to make that like make it more adventurous and make it a little less like on rails would maybe be like making adaptive encounters and, go like not necessarily full Breath of the Wild, but make it so you can go to whatever gym you want at any time. And it will get progressively more difficult as you go. But that's because the gym leaders themselves, in the Pokemon world, they'd be constantly battling and getting stronger as they go. And so you apply that concept to it, as you're battling, however many battles you do in between here to there.
It's not static.
Yeah. That would actually be really refreshing for Pokemon to do it in a, whatever order you want.
That's really how Breath of the Wild handled the difficulty too. Because like you said, you could handle those dungeons in any order, but the difficulty of the bosses was also scaled to the order that you did it in. So if I did the water dungeon first and you did the fire dungeon first, if I were to do the fire dungeon afterwards, it'd be harder for me. And it would have been easier for you. So that'd be an interesting prospect, I think.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate like the kind of jump we're making in terms of the hardware. We've never ever had, this kind of jump before. With the visual fidelity, what the Switch is capable compared to what the 3DS is capable of.
Maybe we'll have Pokemon battles in 60 FPS for once.
I think the most impressive thing about that too is like you see what third parties are doing with this hardware. Just imagine what Nintendo themselves can do with this hardware when they're putting it, at its maximum capacity, because no one can make a game for Nintendo console like Nintendo. No one can utilize that hardware like Nintendo.
They're always the kings of their platform. You look at Super Mario Odyssey, and some of like the technical things they're doing with that game are incredible. And it's happening on a handheld, something barely stronger than a Wii U.
I think it was NVC I was watching today, and they're talking about like file sizes and how they don't know how Nintendo gets their file sizes for their games so small. When like you look at what their games are achieving compared to their like third-party competition, and like it's just night and day.
Well, I mean, even you look at Nintendo compared to Nintendo. I mean, the recent example of Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, the Switch version of that game is half the size of the Wii U version,
and it's got more content.
Right. So I don't know what kind of optimizations, what kind of ways they're saving space, but I mean, Nintendo knows what they're doing. So the possibilities of, I think that's why I find this conversation so compelling, is because of the possibilities that come with this transition.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, because of that power, there's options that the series had that it's never had before. And I think that was true from the DS to the 3DS as well, because it was also it was not an insignificant jump in power. So that's why we saw, really the first 3D mainline Pokemon game with X and Y, and everybody's like, oh my God, it's finally happening. But in the grand scheme of things, it's like, Why are we getting excited about this? Every other franchise ever has made the jump to 3D.
And in the case of Pokemon, it felt like a half step because the gameplay didn't really change all that much. It was the same basic principle. It was still locked to a grid.
It wasn't
until quality of life changes that made it a better experience, but it was still a Pokemon game.
Yeah,
right. I mean, I say this again and again. Like, it wasn't until the next generation with Sun and Moon that they even took away the grid. You know, I was like, why am I still walking on a grid in a 3D space? Like, it made sense for like the Game Boy, right? To structure it that way and to quantify it that way, but we're past that. And obviously, the Pokemon Company, Game Freak, and they're all like, oh, hey, this is kind of archaic. We don't need this anymore. So I really hope that with this next entry, they really cast off a lot of that unnecessary legacy stuff in there. You know,
a lot of things, a lot of adventuring aspects are like, locked to like HMs and whatnot. With what we were talking about earlier, you could just burn actions like into the trainer, give the trainer a little bit more control.
You know what that would give you?
What's that?
That gives you the anime experience, which I think is what everybody wants. Yeah, you want that interaction with your Pokemon other than just like, hey, here they are for battle. Hey, I'm done battling. They don't exist anymore.
One of our YouTube comments is actually bringing up an interesting question. They're saying, now with the Switch, there's nothing in the way of local connectivity like the 3DS with Street Pass. How do you think Nintendo will deal with the lack of functionality for events? Mobile, that's how they're going to do it. They have the My Nintendo system set up, and with Switch Online on the way, I have a feeling like they're going to integrate your smartphone into more experiences like that. I could be wrong, but, with that connectivity, you're logged into both your phone and into your Switch, and we've already seen some kind of interactions between the two. So I wouldn't be surprised if, like, even the Nintendo Switch Online app itself would have some way for you to, download special event Pokemon or event items when you're at events like that. So that's a good question. Thank you for asking. Also, hello to the Twitch chat as well. Other ways I want to see Pokemon kind of redefined with the Switch. We haven't talked about battling much. I don't necessarily want the battle system itself to change all that much. That's the core of Pokemon. It's the battle system. There's only so much you can do to that without making people upset. So what I want to see, and something that I'm sure a lot of other people do, if you look back at games like Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Coliseum, you have the cameras whipping around, and you have an announcer in the background who's calling what's taking place in the battle. That stuff is cool. That just adds to
cinematic.
It adds to like the visual and audio experience.
And that's why the game should run at 24 FPS.
Cinematic experiences on Nintendo Switch Pokemon. But no, like one of the things in Pokemon Stadium I always loved is that they went the extra mile and had voice samples and voice clips to announce the battle taking place. It made me feel like I was in the anime. And the better the hardware, I think the closer we should be able to get to that. We already talked about like having natural, organic interactions with Pokemon out in the wild and traversing the world in a more organic way. So I think that's an obvious next step. And when we go into battles, I don't want to be transitioned to a battle screen. Let the battle take place naturally in the place that we are. I think there's some interesting ways to handle that.
Yeah, I think there's also some other RPGs that maybe Pokemon could look for inspiration, more modern ones. Ni no Kuni has some great presentation and still keeps that very cartoony style. And there was another one I was thinking of. I think Game Freak should be talking to Monolith Soft about presentation.
Oh, for sure.
And world building. Like, absolutely. Like, Nintendo has such a wide breadth of developers and skills that I don't think there's an excuse not for this game to just blow everybody out of the water, to make all the Pokemon skeptics who are like, oh, why hasn't Pokemon progressed, in 6 or 7 generations, right? At least not to the point that we'd expect it to. So I really think that I imagine this game has been in development at least ever since Sun and Moon finished up. at least to a certain degree. And if anything else, hopefully even before Sun and Moon, they were thinking about this game and maybe had a team who were building assets so that by time they were in full swing, they could just focus on building the game instead of building, bits and pieces of it.
I think we can gather that Nintendo was in a state of emergency towards the end of the Wii U's life, and they were pushing to get this system out. So I'd be shocked if Pokemon Switch hasn't been in development for a little bit longer than we're aware. Really quick, Dream Drop Sora is also saying, if you're looking for interesting battle systems that Pokemon could take off of, there's also Xenoblade Chronicles. Battles would be cool if you could have them in the field like in those games. Yeah, that's exactly what we're saying, so we're definitely there with you.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of on the same wavelength. Like, we see a way forward for Pokemon. Sure. And it's just a matter of, chatting it out and really getting a vision. And I think I trust Game Freak enough to have these sort of conversations. The same, like, oh, wow. Like, because you always, when you're building something, when you're creating something, you have to consider your limitations. You have to consider what kind of medium you're working with. And so, one of those limitations is the hardware. And so now that limitation went from here all the way through the roof. A relative level, obviously.
Right.
So they have so much more freedom to do so many more things with Pokemon now. I feel like Pokemon really hasn't come into the modern age yet. And I feel like this is its opportunity to make that happen.
It's good that you say that, because that actually plays into Dream Drop Sora's other question. They say, aside from that, is there any sort of creative innovation you'd like to see with the Switch's features? There's split Joy-Cons for potential couch battling. What do you think? I think couch battling would be great. We're aware of the ability to, log in with your Switch account on someone else's system. There's a game out right now that can do that. I think it's Rocket League.
Yeah. Yep, it's Rocket League. Yeah, so I did that with my brother, yeah.
Imagine being able to do that with Pokemon on Switch. You could have your Pokemon team saved to the cloud, and you could head over to your friend's house. Don't even have to bring your Switch. You could log on to their system, and then you could have a 2-player Pokemon versus match, just like that.
Yeah, in general, I want to see that done in more places.
Yeah, sure. I think Nintendo's probably been saving it for their own stuff. Obviously, the functionality is there. They wouldn't have built the functionality into the system if they didn't have an intention of using it. I think they've been saving it, though, for the Switch Online, because obviously it requires a cloud save. We have the account system that's present. Like my younger brother didn't have his own Nintendo account originally when he played on my Switch. But when he made it on my other brother's Switch and then bought it off of him, he made that Nintendo account. And then when we were playing on my Switch in Rocket League, it had him link his account, and all of a sudden his avatar changed to what his avatar is on his home console. So all that functionality is there. It's there. Nintendo has been listening, and they're like, oh crap, we got to do this online right. And I think they're so close. I just need to see it because I'm still a skeptic. But I think that's there for a reason, and I think it will be utilized for Pokemon for Switch.
So I know this isn't innovative, but I know, Brian, you're probably going to love this. Using that gyroscope so you can do some Pokemon Snap style photography.
Oh, for sure. They played around with a little bit that in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Take it to the next level. I need Pokemon Snap.
Okay, and here's the other thing. What does all of their games have now? What do all modern games have? They have a photo mode. And even to a degree, it was in Sun and Moon.
Yeah.
And so that's just going to go overboard. They're going to have a photo mode, and it'll be integrated in some interesting way. And everybody will be like, hey, this is why we didn't get Pokemon Snap, because Pokemon Snap is in Pokemon now.
Can you just imagine the potential there of especially Switch Online? Everybody's going to be sending pictures of just Pokemon in random places to each other, especially if they're very out there in the field, you can see them everywhere.
Right.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
It's hey, I found this in this really odd place. take a look at this, man.
That's a great reason to even like integrate it, because if they do go that route where everything is more organic and natural and the world's more filled, just the possibilities for different snapshots you could take would be incredible. Like you look at how popular it is with games like Super Mario Odyssey and even games like Super Smash Brothers, which are very limiting with their photo modes. So I think that could take off.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just something that I expect at this point, because I mean, even outside of something that's well integrated into a game, I mean, Nintendo has the capture button on the Switch, and people share that stuff all the time. Like all you need is just a 30-second video clip of you doing something cool in Breath of the Wild, and all of a sudden it's got thousands of hits over Reddit or something like that, and people are just constantly using that and just posting it and like, hey, look at this cool thing I did, or look at this amazing interaction I saw. Maybe that's something we'll see pictures of Pokemon interacting in interesting ways, in the real world. Wonderful. Like you'll just be off in a distance and you'll just see like I don't know, a herd of Pidgeys that get mad at you and your Pikachu, and then they attack you.
That'd be amazing.
You see Bezeljuice just take on Deviljho.
That's one of the things that I think would, like, if any of this is actually happening, I would say that we would be going back to Gen 1 for this, because that's a complete reinvention of Pokemon, and also that's a lot of work. Limit yourself to 151 Pokemon if you're going that far.
Yeah, and then, I mean, with the games as a service model, you could always add Pokemon later.
A persistent Pokemon game.
Oh, now you're speaking my language, boy.
You would sell the heck out of that.
Oh my God. People have been asking that for a long time. Put all the regions in one game. We'll take that a step further. Make it a game that doesn't end. Make it a world that keeps living past the end of the story.
Now you're just talking about Pokemon like MMO, which is what people have been asking for since
Would that not fit better on a system, launched. A console?
Yeah. I mean, I think if there's a time it's more possible. Yeah. So
that'd be the best $20 a year I've ever spent.
Dream Drop Store is taking this a step further, and they're saying, imagine seeing two Pokemon just battling naturally in the wild.
Well, that's what I was trying to say earlier. I mean, I went with the Pidgey thing because I was trying to allude to the anime.
There's Spearows in that episode.
Oh, Spearows. Yeah. It's all the same. They're just all bird Pokemon.
I knew what you were going for.
That's why you're never going to catch one in our
Whatever,
server.
Man. Whatever. Yeah, I'm not very good. Actually, I'm not very knowledgeable about Pokemon, so forgive me.
It's okay. The only reason why I've caught as many Pokemon as I have is because I Google every single Pokemon.
Oh, dude, I Google it all the time, but then Brandon and Levi are on, and Levi knows all the Pokemon, and by the time I get there, I'm like, oh, they already caught it.
Yeah, I know a decent amount. Dream Drop Store is also asking about Amiibo functionality. Here's the thing about Amiibo. I honestly think Amiibo are on the way out.
Don't say that. Don't say that. I just
started buying
more. I just bought more. I mean, that being said,
hear me out.
Okay.
I don't think they're completely on the way out. I think that they're just going to be reduced to a collector's item, which is pretty much how they're treated right now as it is.
Right.
With very, very limited functionality. Maybe it'd just be something cosmetic. Honestly, that's really all they've been doing with it, and I don't think it'll ever go beyond that.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I mean, give us like reasons, right? And give us some exclusive items,
There's over 700 Amiibo that could come out of this.
Right.
That's why it'd be good to go back to Gen 1 and just have 150 to work with.
Dream Drop Store is also bringing up the possibility of cards. That's what they did with Animal Crossing. They had the Animal Crossing cards.
I could see that.
I'm still waiting for my Amiibo-based Yu-Gi-Oh game.
What if they did an Amiibo?
I will never stop asking for that.
Well, what if they did an Amiibo-based like Pokemon trading card game?
I'd be fine with that. I don't care what it is. Like, I feel like that would be the future card games, right?
Integrate the card game into the main series. Let's do that.
Hear me out.
Do it.
You get that Yu-Gi-Oh like dual. What were they?
The dual disc.
Dual disc, but it has a little hole. You put the switch in it. And then you tap your cards to it and scan it, and then it has a little thing that can hold your cards.
Oh my god.
I would buy that.
It would be super cringy. But I'd love it.
It'd be the dumbest thing, but everyone would have one.
Bunch of idiots in front of their like TVs.
So, yeah, I don't think they'll get too crazy with Amiibo. I'm not even so sure that there'll be Amiibo support. If they go the card route, I could definitely see it happening.
Yeah.
So one thing we should really touch on is online features. We already talked about the potential of cloud saves with Pokemon. You know, being able to save your Pokemon to the Pokemon Bank, which is the service that they already offer. Imagine that'd be cool. Like for the $20 a month, you also get free access to Pokemon Bank. I think that would be neat. I think a lot of people would be into that. So like,
I mean, that essentially like just adds, you know, an extra, like, what is it? The Pokemon makes like $5 a year, you know?
Yeah.
So
just group it right
like
in with the
it
price.
adds that much more value to the proposition.
Yeah.
So all your Pokemon are already available. They're always there on the cloud, so you can download them to your new games. When future Pokemon games come out, assuming that they don't go with like a persistent route with this one. But what other online features do you want to see? Like we've got lots of global trading features, which were introduced well over 10 years ago now, like on Nintendo DS, which is pretty impressive considering the time. You have online battling, which has never been particularly easy to initiate. They got better with that in X and Y, and I think they actually took a step back with Sun and Moon, personally. Because in X and Y, all of those features were just accessible on the bottom screen, and you could just tap on the face of one of your friends. I want to battle you. They'd get the invitation. They'd say yes, and then you would go from your single-player adventure right into the battle mode.
That's so good.
They need to go back to that because that was fantastic. It actually encouraged me to take steps to play my friends online.
Which gave you more incentive to actually train your Pokemon and customize them and deck them out, you know, get to that level 100.
Just make it easier on the user, and I think that'll go a long way.
I think if they
go ahead, Paul.
If they make it more like the battle system more like Pokemon Stadium games, and then they make it just intuitive to start a battle with your friends. Like the one thing that I always appreciate about Pokemon Stadium, at least when you're playing with your friends, is you can set it up so that you're on equal footing. And I want to say that there are modes like that. I've never actually explored like the battle systems.
The majority of the battle systems, like in modern Pokemon games, default your levels to an equal level. I believe that's how they play in tournaments too. So those features are pretty much there. They could go farther with like a Pokemon rental system, just like for free.
I'd be
battle.
down for that.
So, like a party mode almost.
Yeah, I mean, if you could do it like both ways, you know, they make it just intuitive, easy to access, easy to start a battle with your friends, you know, at any point. I think they got it.
What's going on, Logan?
I just had like the dumbest thought ever, right?
Okay.
So like you like Pokemon Party mode, and I immediately thought Mario Party, except with Pokemon. And then I was like, how freaking awful would that be? Like, and like, okay, and here's the best part. Like, what happens if everybody's hyping up Pokemon? They're like, oh, we got Pokemon news on the way. And instead of announcing the actual Pokemon game, they're like, here's Pokemon Party. It's like Mario Party, except with Pokemon. And we just don't get a mainline game.
Here's the thing. If they made it more like the early Mario Party games, I'd be into it.
Yeah, actually, I'm with Paul.
They're just replace Mario Party with Pokemon.
Well, don't forget, the Pokemon Stadium games had like party game mini games, and they were actually good. They've dabbled in mini games like on some of the more recent 3DS titles. I think they could go back to that and flesh them out more like Pokemon Stadium. That'd be fun.
Yeah,
take my money.
Yeah.
And, you know, put those features online. Stop limiting party features to local multiplayer, Nintendo. We don't all live in the same place. The three people in this podcast don't live in the same place. We want to play games together.
We're kind of far away right now. I mean, we could be further away. We're all in Central Time, so
I guess,
I don't want to... Yeah.
One of the things I want to be clear about, or not clear about, one of the things I want to mention is the possibility of cooperative adventuring. So if we have,
co-op would be so good.
If we have like a persistent world that is based on exploring, being able to explore that with a friend would be pretty neat.
Right. Okay, actually, I wanna just say this right now. Dream Drop Sora is talking. He says, "Oh, you think Pokemon Party would be bad? There's actually a Mario Party clone on the GameCube with Mickey, Donald, Goofy, etc. called Disney's Party. It's wild, like some fever dream." LMAO. Okay, and I just want to clarify. I'm not saying that Pokemon Party would be bad. You could make a party game with Pokemon equivalent to Mario Party and it'd be good. What the joke was, why my thought was so bad is that we get that instead of a mainline Pokemon game.
It's like
and
when they
that would be awful.
Sunshine remake, but then they put it on 3DS instead of the Switch.
That's essentially what that would be.
Exactly.
Well, that's what happened with us last year.
John in the chat, it's okay, Logan. Just remember you have a wonderful stash.
Oh, thank you. I've been working hard on it. My sister commented on it today. She goes, "It's looking more full than it did the other day." I'm like, "Yeah, it's looking like a man stash."
So what kinds of ways could they integrate co-op play into Pokemon and actually make it interesting?
That's a good question, because I think there's a lot of different examples of co-op in different games. For example, I started playing Bloodborne just recently in the past month or two, right? And the co-op system in that game is really interesting because the game is balanced for single player. So you actually have to gain insight, and then to do co-op, you have to spend the insight. And what happens is you like ring a bell, and then somebody who's in that area in their game will ring another bell, whether it be, I can't remember the exact name of the bells, but one bell is for co-op. So you're helping each other out. And then another bell is for like battling. So if you want to go PvP, you ring that bell. You're looking for somebody to fight. And I'm not saying that's what Pokemon should do, but I'm saying is there's a lot of different routes that Pokemon could go with the co-op, and they need to do it right, because you want to balance it for the single player experience, right? Because that's what Pokemon ultimately is, at least as we know it now. That could definitely change, but let's assume that it doesn't change terribly drastically, and that it's still at its core, a single player game. So outside of, dueling, how do you make a cooperative experience?
You'd have to really play integrate that. The exploration, I think, and the way you traverse the world, I think, would have to be the first thing that they tackle.
Right. So, like, would you guys exist in the same instance of the same world and be able to trade Pokemon on the fly, or maybe I'll come over here and I'll attack these guys from the back, or we can go into like a single battle together,
or I can run up and catch all the Pidgeys before Brandon can.
Don't you dare.
Right.
Well, imagine like another aspect of the anime that's been there since the very beginning is that Team Rocket is there in every episode, and they're gonna do something to Ash and the Twipes to try to steal Pikachu. So maybe we do have a Team Rocket or some other team or force that is constantly enacting on you and trying to stop you. And instead of being scripted events, maybe there's just a big pool of events that can take place, and they'll just happen at random. And then you're there with your partner or whoever you're traveling with, and now you have to tackle that situation together.
We're doing the same thing. Here. Oh, Paul, go ahead.
Oh, there's a lot of value to having that experience traversing this world. If adventure is a big part of it, there's a lot to it if you're experiencing all of that with a friend. If you come across the legendary at the same time and one of you decides to run ahead, like that becomes an aspect of it.
That'd be amazing.
You can be looking for the same Pokemon and one person can snipe it from the other, and so it kind of adds a bit of competition. It changes the whole experience.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
So I just want to side tangent here. I think we're doing with Pokemon what we did with Breath of the Wild. And we're throwing out all of these really ambitious ideas. And for anybody watching this currently,
we're sorry you'll be disappointed.
Don't expect any of this.
This is purely speculation.
It's a lot of speculation.
What?
And
this isn't the Pokemon game?
I mean, I think if Game Freak were to deliver on any number of these things, I would be incredibly impressed. But that being said, I can't imagine that Nintendo is not going to pump a ton of money and time into this game, because it's like the best-selling franchise. It's going to make money.
Yeah.
Like, every time these games sell a minimum of 10 million. Usually, I think Sun and Moon was like over 16 million. So these games are going to sell well every time. And then think about the increased revenue, because you're not going to be selling a $40 game anymore. These are $60 games now.
And if you're selling two versions of each game that's like selling them a third version every time.
Right. And so they're going to make a ton of money off of this, and now even more so. And especially, I could imagine that the Switch install base will surpass the 3DS at some point. The 3DS is sub 70 million, and we're already like well past like 15 million.
Whether that becomes feasible is, I think, entirely dependent. Well, not entirely, but majorly dependent on how Pokemon turns out. If it really does push the envelope in the ways that we've been discussing here, I do think that exactly what you said will take place.
Well, I have a hard time thinking that it won't. But then again, people make mistakes. But then again, we're dealing with a Nintendo that put out Super Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild last year.
I would be worried still that they're used to selling two versions of this game, and they know that it will just sell. I'm hoping that they ignore that and make the changes that need to happen to make the experience more compelling, instead of just being complacent like, hey, this is going to make money anyway, just crank it out.
I feel like the games that they've been releasing recently are kind of in favor of them pushing the envelope, because they've done it a little bit with each game, and now they have the opportunity to take it farther than they ever have before.
Yeah, the last few generations have not been lacking in the progression. They have been pushing it, and again, one of the things that's holding them back is the fact that they're working on the 3DS. So I imagine they're trying to do be as ambitious as they can be with the tools that they're given. And so I hope the same is true with the Switch, and that they really, push it to its limits, visually, in its presentation, in its systems, in getting rid of all that legacy stuff that doesn't need to be there, and just making this game feel like it belongs in I'm tempted to say the 21st century, but these games came out originally in 98.
It was the 90s, yeah.
Right.
But where's my Pokemon Digimon crossover game?
Okay, see, now this is beyond speculation, and now you're just trying to
Are you trying to be the Roger in this discussion?
Maybe.
Oddly specific.
Throw us off all of a sudden.
They're basically the same thing at this point, so I actually love both of them, and I didn't mean that. I'm sorry.
So, I've had a lot of fun talking about Pokemon. I think we come up with a lot of cool ideas. I wouldn't expect anything that we said here to actually happen, but if it does, you heard it here first. But with that, we do have to move on to the next segment of the show. This is the breakdown portion of the Breakdown podcast. This is where we talk about the movies, TVs, games, and other experiences that we've been doing in the media over the last week. So just to kick things off with movies and TV right away, typically, I guess I have been talking about Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network a lot recently. I've been watching a lot of Drake and Josh for some reason.
Because it's fantastic.
There's that meme that's just popped up recently of the episode where they're trapped in the treehouse and Drake didn't saw the door hole out, so they get stuck.
Oh, I saw one. Somebody made a whole Castlevania-esque
it was
animation. Yeah, it was somebody put some time in. And I was and they even did some audio editing and digitized some of the actual images from the meme and everything. And I was this is crazy impressive. People really are going all out with the memes.
So, oftentimes when we go back to shows that we watched as children, we learn that we had awful taste. That's not the case with Drake and Josh. That show is a real gem. A lot of it comes down to Drake Bell and Josh Parker, just being or
Josh Peck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For just
wow.
I'm just off my game. It's Drake Parker in the show. That's why I did that. It comes down to just how great those two are together. They have great chemistry. They really sell their lines. You look at a lot of like Dan Schneider's more recent shows, and the child actors they're not on the same level that Drake and Josh were. And you could say the same about Keenan and Kel, which is the Drake and Josh before Drake and Josh. In my mind, Drake and Josh is the sequel series to Keenan and Kel because it's pretty close to the same idea. But I've been watching around like season 3 where Josh first starts dating Mindy. I just crossed into season 4 today. I'm pretty into that right now. I love this show, man. I really,
it was pretty good.
Really hope that those two come together at some point for maybe just like a reunion special, even if they just did it like on Jimmy Fallon or something.
Right.
They had that feud with Drake not getting invited to Josh's wedding, but that seems like they've since made up and, dealt with that.
Broke everyone's heart.
Yeah. It hurt.
I was very upset for a very long time.
Dream Drop Sora saying, did you hear about Dan Schneider? Stuff was insane. I remember growing up and seeing all the stuff, the feat he'd write in and just think, WTF? I've not heard about what's been happening with Dan Schneider. Please enlighten us. Because he has been working on like live action series for Nickelodeon pretty much since the beginning of Nickelodeon. He's been there for so long. And as I've been watching Drake and Josh, I've been noticing that Dan Schneider's name is on every like company name or building like in the show. It's Schneider's Hospital or Schneider's Diner, just everywhere.
I never noticed that.
It didn't happen for me until just a couple days ago. But yeah, it's one of those comfort shows for me. It's just something I can watch, non-committal. I can feel good while I'm watching it because it reminds me of my younger days and just hanging out with Drake and Josh, just like I did when I was a kid. So I've been enjoying that. I've also been watching the new season of Roseanne. I know Roseanne can be a little controversial because her show tends to run a little conservative. But they've been handling it pretty tastefully, I think. In the first episode specifically, it was very much an episode about left versus the right. It was a little bit shocking, actually. But they handle it pretty tastefully. They don't like shove any ideas down anybody's throats. So it's still comfortable to watch. I was a fan of Roseanne. It's an original show, and it's really no different. You can see Roseanne's age affecting her line delivery a little bit. Every now and again when she's talking, she'll like stutter during a line, like stop for like half a second and then continue reading her line. I'm going to guess there might be some like health aspects that are preventing her from getting through a full line in one take. But, I can look past that just because I enjoy seeing these characters again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure like this is just like, I'm not sure what season this would be, but whatever it is. 9. I thought they were like past 10. I thought this was like maybe season 11 or something like that.
They're retconning the final season of the original Roseanne. And acting as if that didn't happen. Because for those of you who haven't seen the finale of the original Roseanne, in the last episode, you find out that everything that had been taking place in that last season was a lie and that Roseanne had written it in her book and that Dan had actually died. Jackie, her sister, was a lesbian. The boyfriends that her 2 daughters had were actually with the other sister. It was really polarizing for fans because it just kind of came out of left field. To find out that Dan was dead, too, was kind of painful for a lot of people because he's been on the show since the beginning. So Dan's alive. Good news, everyone. John Goodman's still on the show. Their last son, I think, was completely retconned because there was a baby in the last season between Roseanne and Dan, and I don't think he exists anymore. So
that's so odd.
I know.
That's so weird.
What's great, though, is like in one of the first episodes, Becky is the older sister, and she's actually played by 2 actresses in the original run of Roseanne, and they're both in Roseanne, like the new season. So the original Becky is now playing Becky again. And she's gonna be like a surrogate mother for this lady so she can make some money. The other lady is the second Becky from the original run. So like you have this mini story arc with the 2 of them for a couple episodes. It's really good, really well done. So yeah, I've been enjoying that. Like 4 episodes deep. Roseanne is still as loud and obnoxious as she's always been.
Can I interject for a second? Because that sounded like that. Now I'm like really fascinated. I think I'm stuck on this whole retcon season. Like,
go back and watch it. I swear.
Like, it sounds like something that they would just go on. It's like, oh, I mean, even outside of like, oh, it didn't actually happen, and she's not even putting it. What would happen if she like, it wasn't actually like a diary, or what happens if like she like went insane and then they just take the whole show in a different like conceptual like direction and just stuff like that,
hard right
and make
turn.
it like make it just like some weird psychedelic experience. It takes like that turn that happens at the end of Evangelion, everybody's like, where the heck did this come from? It's like, oh, they ran out of budget, so they had to get real abstract.
That'd be a crazy thing to do with like primetime television on ABC. Quick note, Dream Drop Sword did update us on Dan Schneider. Essentially, his contract with Nick isn't being renewed, and it's rumored that it is because of his rather perverted usage of girls and children, especially plenty of episodes with foot fetish content. If all that's true, then good riddance, unfortunately, despite all the great shows.
But like I can easily see that with all the allegations that were coming out, coming to light recently,
Yeah. If that happens to be true, it's disappointing because so many people that we've been finding things about recently, and it's disappointing to find out that there's these aspects of the character that were unknown to us, and it completely like changes your perception, and it just sucks.
Though, that being said, I don't want to knock anybody if they do happen to have some sort of foot fetish. Okay,
the foot fetish isn't that's the problem here. So that's all I've been watching this week. Logan, what have you been doing?
I haven't watched a lot of TV per se. I watched some anime, but I have been keeping up. There's several TV shows that I'm like in the midst of watching that I need to like watch like the first few episodes that have come out for this more recent season. But the show that I've really been keeping up with week by week is Last Man on Earth. And I've mentioned it before and I've talked about it, and I feel like, they had kind of a loose footing for a lot of the 4th season, but these last few episodes have been really, really compelling, and I really like what they're doing. I'll describe. I feel like I should give this a little bit of a spoiler because it might encourage you guys to watch it because it's just such a funny show.
You've been warned.
So every once in a while, they'll throw in like a character for a small arc, right? They do it in arcs. Each season kind of takes place in a different location. Like something happens where they kind of have to just get up and move. In one season, they were settling in this building. They're like, oh, this place is so cool. It's in like Silicon Valley or something like that. And there's all this cool crap around. And then all of a sudden, like near the end of the season, they see this nuclear reactor starting to break down. And they're like, we got to get out. But one of my favorite arcs in this season, they introduced a character played by Fred Armisen. And I love Fred Armisen. Love Fred Armisen. He's such an oddball. If you watch Portlandia, he does a great job in Portlandia. Okay. Also a great show. But his character is a serial killer / cannibal, right? And so before like the virus came, he had just been killing people and eating them, and he always would do this thing where he'd invite them, and he'd invite them he wants to paint them, right? And then they'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. And then they'd sit down and he'd start painting them, and they're anticipating this really like beautiful like painting. But every time it ends up this like, it looks like it's painted like a 4-year-old, it's just like super, super awful. And then people look at it and they're like, oh my gosh. And, he gets through several people, and then eventually he gets caught. And then he goes down to Mexico and he does the same thing. And then he gets caught in Mexico, and they actually catch him and lock him up. So when the virus hits, he's in prison, And eventually, some of the characters find him in this prison, and they have to deal with him. They don't know he's a cannibal when they meet him. He presents himself as a guard. But the way they wrote the character out of the show was the most bombastic and overwritten thing ever, and it was absolutely beautiful. So I was wondering how they were going to do this. Eventually, he revealed himself to be a cannibal. Okay, and all of a sudden, everybody's like, "Oh, farts!" Okay, and that's actually one of the
oh, farts.
That's one of the catchphrases by the main character, played by Will Forte. The name of the character is Phil Tandy. They just refer to as Tandy, and so I guess they get around the F word by saying "oh, farts," because it's on Fox.
Sure.
But eventually, they come to the decision that they have to kill him, and even his Fred Armisen's character, the cannibal, kind of accepts it. He goes, "Yeah, that would be the right thing to do." And it kind of makes you like connect with the cannibal. You're like, "Oh my gosh, the cannibal is crazy, but he's so crazy. He understands that he's crazy and that he shouldn't be left alive.
He's so crazy, he's rational."
Right. And so they come to this decision, and they're like, "Okay, well, we're gonna shoot him, right? He'll stand there, and we'll make him go bye. And so they have this like build up, and then Tandy eventually is like, "Okay, I'll shoot him. I'll do it." And there's another sub arc, okay, that plays into this as well. So it like both of these arcs collide, and that's how it finishes. And once it finished, I was like, I can't believe that's how they wrote it out. There's this other sub arc where they explain that there's this the current place they're in was like the home of this drug lord, right? And it was a lady, and she had a hit on her, right? And one of her main dudes had a hit on her, and eventually the cops came in and all this other stuff. And so they were trying to kill her with a Rubik's Cube. She loved playing this Rubik's Cube, and this Rubik's Cube had a bomb in it. So once you solved it, it would explode. And so Tandy had been messing with this for almost the entire season, and they played it so much, and he's like, "Hey, I got it." And they show one side, and they finished it. He goes, "Oh, I got one side done," And they played it up like he finished it. But he never finishes it. But he gives it to this guy, and I can't remember. I want to know the name of the character. I can't remember it. Oh well. Fred Armisen's character picks it up, and he goes to shoot Fred Armisen's character, right? And he does the whole thing, and it's super long and drawn out, where he's standing in this this casket, waiting to be shot, just to fall into the casket, and then Tandy turns his back to him and very slowly walks 10 paces with his pistol, because Tandy's he has to overplay everything. And as soon as he's like, he hits the end of the countdown, Fred Armisen gets that last click, and he goes, "I did it!" Poof! And there's this like massive explosion on screen, and then Tandy finishes it up with "oh, farts," and then it plays past that. But it was just one of the best moments on the show thus far. So I mean, this show has
subverting expectations.
Yeah, this show has some really, really great writing to it. And again, it fumbles here and there, and you're not sure where it's going to go, but you can tell that they're aware of what they're doing, and that they okay, how are we going to do this? And let's do it in a really comical or meaningful way. So anybody watching, for you guys, I can't recommend the show enough. It's in its 4th season. I can't imagine that it'll go much further than 1 or 2 more seasons. It feels like it's getting to the point where they might be making a major point about the show and have some grand resolution, and I hope they do it justice, because I think one of the strengths of this show is it's called The Last Man on Earth, and the first season starts just with Phil Tandy, and there's nobody there. So that's how they set out. I was like, oh, he's the last man on Earth. But then you discover that there's other people, including other men, and you're like, well, maybe that's not what the show is alluding to. And my current hypothesis is that, this show deals a lot with relationships, a lot with how the characters interact, and it's very much like a drama, like a dramedy in that way, much more on the comedy side. But it's always dealing with people struggling with other people, having to live with these select group of people and having to deal with each other. And it centers around Tandy most of the time. And I think that's where The Last Man on Earth comes, because he tends to be a really selfish person, especially at the start. He's only thinking of himself. Here's a pretty lady. Oh, I want to have sex with her. And but you can see the progression of the character. You see him grow into somebody who cares a little bit more. And so I feel like it's coming to the point where he's like, hey, I'm not the last man on Earth. It's like, I'm not the only person I should be thinking about. And that's what it feels like to me. And I feel like it's been pretty present while not explicitly stated, which I think that's the best way to go about it. So I can't recommend the show enough. I think the show has grown a lot in 4 seasons, and I can't wait to see how it ends.
Is that on Hulu?
It is on Hulu, and the newest episodes are up on Hulu every week.
Sweet.
That scene you were describing, it sounded really good, but at first I thought you were going to say that they ended up eating the cannibal. That was how they.
That also would have been really funny, but I don't think it would have played into the characters very well. Yeah. So
I like what they did better, but that was why I thought you were going with that.
Yeah,
Paul, what have you been watching?
So, in like the 2 days after last week's podcast, I had finished 2 Netflix series, one of which I was only halfway through. I was talked a little bit about On My Block last weekend. I finished it that night. I was very upset. I'm already looking forward to season 2 of that. This show just like, it takes place with street smart kids, and it has a lot of humor to it, but it also gets very real very often. And it does a very good job of balancing the humor with these very heavy events. And it just it ends on a heavier note, but it's just a very interesting show with a very interesting dynamic. And it's honestly not too different than the other Netflix series I watched, but I'd still recommend watching On My Block. The other show I watched was a Brandon recommendation of Everything Sucks. I sat down to watch that.
Very good. Sounds like it sucks.
That's where you're wrong somehow.
Netflix
I'm doing more stand-up as of late with all these good quips and jokes.
I sat down to watch the first episode, and then I found myself up at 4 a.m. finishing the series.
Oh, that's always fun. I mean, at the same time, it's not, but at the same time, it's like when you find a show that's when you find a show that's compelling enough where you're like, I just want to keep watching. I've been finding myself doing that with My Hero Academia, and it's been really hard to do that with shows as of late. Probably because I've been, working a lot and stuff. But then when you're willing to sacrifice your health and your sleep for a show, it's a good show.
I mean, that week in particular, we're in the middle of a blizzard here, so there's nothing really else for me to do. So right. I got a lot done this last week just because I couldn't go outside. But with Everything Sucks, it is such a delightful show. I know you've talked a little bit about how it takes place in the 90s, and so a lot of what's going on is very familiar to me as someone who was born in the 90s and grew up and experienced a lot of what they're showing and talking about throughout the series. It isn't very reference heavy, but as someone who experienced that era, it takes you home.
Yeah, it takes us to a simpler time. Reminds me of what things were like.
It does drama really well.
Yeah, I agree. They take some interesting turns with that series, with relationships between characters that you wouldn't think would interact, like based on the way the show goes, but then they do, and you're like, oh, well, I guess this is a thing now.
It's very, like I said, it's very similar to On My Block. Those two shows did such an amazing job of balancing the drama and the comedy. The thing that makes them each unique is just where they take place, their setting, but also the characters are all very distinct from one to the other. But I honestly couldn't recommend either of those shows enough. Like, they are both phenomenal. Could not stop once they started.
There is some sad news regarding Everything Sucks that you discovered before we started.
Unfortunately, it's been canceled after one season, and I didn't read far enough to figure out why, just that it had been.
So,
my heart is broken.
It kind of ends on a cliffhanger, and I guess we'll never know what happened.
See, I'm honestly like, that one in particular, I wouldn't be as upset if it just ends there. There's a little bit of a cliffhanger, but you can kind of fill in the blank however you feel like. Yeah, right. I still feel like there was enough of like
the actual plot of the first season.
Yeah,
right.
So I think you can walk away with it all right.
I hope. Honestly, I don't know, and I don't anticipate this happening. But I hope when Netflix, lets some of these shows go, that they really kind of let them go, and allow maybe other places to pick them up potentially. We've seen that with other shows, and it doesn't happen too often, but it would be nice to see, like, there are shows that aren't particularly great that I was invested in. It's like I could watch the show and be like, there's not anything spectacular necessarily about this show, but I'm just really enjoying myself, and I'd love to see more. And it's silly, like, I watched both seasons of Haters Back Off, and again, it's not the best show ever, but I really like the character of Miranda Sings. I have a lot of respect for Colleen Ballinger, and some of that cast, because it's fun to see those characters. So at the very least, if Colleen was ever to find someone to fund it, like, could she continue the story arc, on YouTube or something like that, maybe in a different, explore that universe, like in a different format.
Or maybe she'll just, that you say that too, because, these streaming services have been seen as like a savior for shows that get canceled on network. So to have a show get canceled on the streaming service in the first place, like, where does it go?
It's kind of disappointing.
Well, I mean, Netflix has a limited amount of money, and they have to invest it where they think they're going to get the returns. And they have so much money that, they probably do get a lot more shows. That the amount of content that Netflix can push out in such a short period of time is incredible. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, even just that's, is great. But again, you can't support everything forever, especially if it becomes unsustainable on a financial front. But I imagine that Netflix can take a lot of risks, and they have taken a lot of risks. They make some good bets, but again, they're still risks. So the fact that we did get 2 seasons of Haters Back Off is cool. But who knows what we'll see next? I mean, there are certain things that we know aren't going anywhere anytime soon, like BoJack Horseman and Stranger Things. And I think we're getting a 2nd season of Big Mouth. I really like what they're doing with the animated shows. I love adult animated shows. So I'd love to see.
I think that is out today. Or maybe it was out this
God
week.
of War?
That's a game. It's like an animated show about a cat, I guess, who's a pop idol, but who hates her life or something like that. And she's like really angry and into metal music.
Okay, I'll have to look into that, because again, like Netflix has a handful of animated shows at this point that are quite exceptional, I would say.
Dream Drop Sora actually has a question. Is there a show you'd really like to see back eventually? Licensing and money are always a killer, but we can dream, huh? Drake and Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of Netflix, I'd love to see Haters Back Off season 3. Colleen, if you ever watch this, I love you, and I want you to bring it back.
I changed my answer to Hannibal.
I was expecting that from you.
Yeah,
but isn't that happening?
Supposedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
It better.
For me, yeah, I think if I could have any show that would come back, I don't know. I don't think a lot about this. And it's funny because I think a lot of the shows that I want back aren't shows that I've even finished what is there. I just have maybe some like cheap nostalgia for it, or like I love the concept. Like I haven't watched all of Hannibal. I haven't even finished the first season of Hannibal, but for the few episodes I've seen, yeah, no, I know. I have them all on my computer. So I'll get to them eventually. But like from what I've seen, like Hannibal's incredible, and I would love to see that show get picked back up and
it
for
was
them
too
to
good for
continue
TV.
on. Yeah, pretty much. That feels like it's sometimes like it feels like a lot of artistry gets like pushed under the rug just because it's not marketable
I keep thinking
enough,
of them as the longer I sit here, the more of them I think of. I got 3 already.
Teen Titans.
That you got me one. I'd rather than like all of the like DC animated universe getting rebooted, just the Justice League Unlimited. I think there's enough flexibility there that they could go from all these really great heroes and give them all really strong story arcs and still have that connected universe and make it a very fun show.
Have you given the new Justice League show a shot?
I haven't. Is it worth it?
I don't know. We should investigate.
Wait! I just thought
Young
of
Justice.
a show! I just
think
thought of a
it's happening
show! We're season 3 of Sekiro.
Oh, Logan.
No, he's right. He's right. I watched that. I started for reasons,
of the fan
and I stayed for the plot.
Yeah, outside of the fan service,
you stay because it's actually a great show.
It is. It's a good show.
I love how like out of like it's just how crazy you got there,
you
Logan. Your hair's falling
by
down.
trying to doubt it.
So yeah,
Young Justice is one of those that needs to come back because I think that's
coming to Netflix, isn't it?
Yeah, and then the very last one is Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes. They need to make more of that because that show is phenomenal.
All of them superhero shows?
Yes. Actually,
I do think Teen Titans is coming back though.
I heard rumors, and that's why I wasn't like I was considering not saying it because it seems pretty likely that they want to finish up the show.
Get a feature film premiering in theaters in July.
Can happen.
Teen Titans can come back.
Right.
For me, it was just that animated universe for DC kind of tapered off for a long time, and we didn't see things quite of the same caliber, at least in my opinion. And so I want to see that resurgence.
I would
those shows were super solid.
Highly recommend fans of the DC animated television universe to watch the DC animated movie universe because they're really good.
I mean, I've picked up a handful of them, and I know they are.
It's a nice alternative for right now.
My favorite DC superhero is Spider-Man.
So we have anime to talk about.
I was just about to do that.
So we're pushing the time a little bit. So
all of our lists.
So Shokugeki no Soma, Paul, you and I watched.
It was good.
Episode 2.
It's going places.
Yeah, they're setting up the second half of this arc, and they're really doing some neat stuff with some characters that we've had since the beginning of the series. A lot of potential character growth, and I'm really excited to see where it goes.
They're going to Fort Briggs?
Yeah, they're going to Fort Briggs in this season. Snow! The other show that all 3 of us watched was My Hero Academia, albeit in different places.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I think that might end up have to being like the at least a larger portion of the discussion for next week, because like I'm getting pretty close to the end of season 2 here, so I'm almost caught up. Yeah,
Real quick,
it's really exciting.
Both of you, what was the last episode you watched? Brand, just tell me, did you catch up on? Okay, Logan?
The last episode of My Hero I watched was Midoriya and all the other students like literally just finished up their internships.
Ooh.
So that whole battle with Stain was it was incredible, because it was just that episode where Midoriya had, well, maybe it was the episode right before that where he figured out really how to wield One for All.
I've got a whole discussion on that. But
so
I'll
to answer
save
your
that.
question in the chat, ask my wife. I like how you both stopped to turn and look.
I was like, are you guys?
Sometimes I ask myself that question. So let's give a hard maybe on my part.
You said you're starting where they're at with the internships, or you're?
It's
finished.
right.
You're finished, okay.
He just ended. So I mean, what was?
You're pretty close then.
Yeah.
I'm so close, and it's so good, and I'm actually really. I'm nervous about finishing up season 2 because then I'm only going to be able to watch one episode a week.
But you're going to
But
get to
then we
watch
can
it
talk
dubbed,
about it
man.
every week.
Right,
That's the
right.
exciting thing
That's
is we
so
can actually
cool.
talk about it.
There are trade-offs. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm really getting to
A long time for you guys to catch up. I've just been sitting on all of this, and it hurts.
Well, I'm there. Logan's almost there.
So close.
Another shout out to Funimation for their simuldubbing, because they do a great job. And the fact that it's even possible is pretty fantastic on its own.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the only 2 anime I watched this week. But, Paul, I know you watched a little bit more.
It was a snowy weekend, so I watched all kinds of anime. I'm still chugging away at Black Clover. It's in an interesting place right now. Maybe watch it if you're looking for something. And, first season's going to be like 50 episodes. I mean, I guess it's probably going to run a while, but, I started the Persona 5 anime. And
Persona 5 isn't an anime, it's a game.
It's an anime now. They got 2 episodes out right now, and it is so similar to the video game. So if you don't want to play that, I strongly recommend you watch that. It was a good game.
Oh,
Great
really
story.
quick. I want to give a shout out to Dream Drop Sora for donating $4. They say not a whole lot since I'm just a penny grabbing about to be a college student, but hey, you guys are great, and I'll definitely stay around as a fan. Keep up the great work, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
That means a lot to
Good
us.
luck in college. We'll be here for all of your college.
Yeah, a few pennies from someone who doesn't have much is infinitely more.
We've all been
meaningful
there.
than, like,
We all know
25
exactly
bucks
what that's like.
from someone like who has like $1 million, So that's really generous.
Okay, that looks like a recommendation from him too. I can't pronounce that, Brandon.
That is Kakegurui.
I'm gonna try to remember.
I think that might be on my list. I just started adding a bunch of like the Netflix original anime to my list.
I that's one thing about me is like people recommend stuff to me and I try and add that to my list, and so it's ever expanding. That's part of the reason why we're doing this, because I just want recommendations from people what I should do. Helps occupy my time. But actually that's a great transition for me, because the last thing I watched this week was a Netflix anime that my old college roommate recommended to me, Children of the Whales. And let me pull up the official description of that, because it's such a weird like world. And I offhand, like the first episode, my first impression was this person watched Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind. Like visually, it is so similar to that show. The story focuses on a boy named Chakro, who lives on a giant vessel called a mud whale that drifts over the sea of sand. In the mud whale, society is divided into 2 kinds of people: the marked, who can move objects with their mind using a strange power called thymia, at the expense of short lifespans, and the unmarked, people who lack thymia but enjoy longer lifespans. Chakra and his friends have never seen anyone from the outside world, and they spend their days yearning to explore and learn about it. In the year 93 of the vessel's exile, the mud whale encounters a lonely island, and Chakra finds a girl inside, starting an adventure that changes the lives of everyone. This started off as a very like light-hearted series, and then like 3 episodes in, the bass drops and everything just goes straight to hell. And so I'm only halfway through it, and I'm still not entirely sure where it's going, but it is a roller coaster, man. Watch it.
Yeah, I've been interested in that one. Just the art style on its own has been really interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a reason to sit through it at the very least.
Yeah. So Paul, you mentioned that that was Logan, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember he recommended that on our Discord, which you can find at the bottom of our website, breakroomarcade.com. If you go to the bottom of the
link
page.
of the YouTube now?
I think we should be adding it, so we will. But if you get onto our Discord, we have a lot of conversation over there. We just did some overhauling and made it look all pretty and added some bots and all that other stuff. So if you want to really enjoy the conversation when we're not having this conversation right here, you can join us over there.
Dream Drop Sora hears me. He's a Jesus. Children of the Whales is so strange. It reminds me a lot of Angel Beats mixed with any given Ghibli film. Very strange, but also very interesting concept. Still got to finish it. I get a lot of that too from it. So weird. It's hard. It's really hard to describe it. Like that's why I had to pull up a description of it because I just couldn't do it justice.
Oh, and I got the alerts working now, so if you do donate, you'll see it on the screen this time. I just to mention, Alex, we have seen Ghost in the Shell. I've at least seen the first movie. I've watched all of Yu-Gi-Oh, and I went to the theater to see the Dark Side of Dimension film that came out last year. I'm a fan.
You know what you're about.
I do know what I'm about. Was that all you watched as far as anime goes, Paul? Was there more?
Surprisingly, yes.
Go for it. Do it.
I went to 5 and I stopped. A lot of those are going to be recurring shows, though, so I'll have
more to
maybe
say.
update them once a week, or I'll probably do more like Black Clover, where no one else is going to watch it, and I'll just mention it that I'm still watching it.
Right.
By myself. But yeah.
Well, I guess with that, we can move into the video game section of the show. And something that Logan and I did was the new Monster Hunter World Siege Quest with the brand new Elder Dragon Kolv
It was
Taroth.
so good. It was so good. Like, structurally, it's just so radically different from anything else we've had in Monster Hunter at this point. And it's this objective-based, multi-session quest that up to 16 people in the same gathering hub can all participate in. You go in as groups of 4, and you just wail on this Elder Dragon until you get to a certain point, and then you chop off his horns. Like, it's great. And it seems like it feels like it's possible to be able to finish it on the first go, but at the same time, it gets so much easier and harder in certain ways.
Yeah.
Every time you do it, like it gets easier because all the parts start to break easier, but then it gets harder because what was the Kolv Taroth or something like that?
It's Kolv Taroth, I believe.
Kolv Taroth, right. But his attacks become more frequent and stronger, and his moveset changes and evolves into something a lot more devastating as you progress through the siege.
Yeah.
It's really good.
I remember, like, the first time we did the quest, like, first of all, like, the hunting ground that they built for it is basically, like, just as big as any of the other ones that are in the game right now. And, like, you fight him, and he doesn't, or she, because it's a lady, and she doesn't really fight you back. She's just kind of, like, walking around, ignoring us. And eventually, like, she gets on, we get on her nerves, and we get pushed to, like, this last arena section. Well, it's not the last section, by the way. And then she actually starts fighting back. And essentially, like, you break parts, and then you'll get a little alert on the right side of the screen saying what part you broke, and it'll add points to that pursuit level that makes the hunt easier and also more difficult in different ways. But what's cool is, like, if you have, like, 16 players in the gathering hub at the same time, while they're in the hunt fighting their version of the monster, when they break apart, you get the alert in your own quest, so you know what they're doing. So, like, the first one we did, we didn't get very far. We got to, like, the second area of the battle, and then we were doing a little bit of damage. We only managed to repel it. So, like, we didn't actually succeed in the hunt. We didn't make it past Area 2. But then Josiah's group, who was also in the room, with a team of 4. He and his group made it to the 4th area on their first run just because of the work that we put in on the first go.
Oh, dang.
So it is definitely a collaborative experience and is one of the coolest, like, most interactive quests they've ever introduced in Monster Hunter. And this is only the first of this type, so there's going to be more, and I'm so excited. Like,
Yeah,
this is the kind of update we needed.
Yeah, Capcom is really, pushing this whole, okay, we're on more powerful hardware, we have a stronger online infrastructure. How can we use that to the advantage of the game? And this is exactly what that is, and it's really, really cool and just a really, really gratifying experience, because you're fighting technically the same monster, and then once you get to that end point where you end up, breaking off of his horns, like you've done it, and then it resets, and then you get to do it all over again. And then, like, the carves that you get, some of those carves, it, like, stacks up all your rewards from, like, all of the quests you did for the entirety of the siege, and you get them all at once. And a chunk of them are just weapons.
They're
just, like,
Culve's
golden
actual weapons that you just get.
Right. And, like, you don't
Right
have
on.
to build them. And there, a lot of them are just reskins of older, like, other weapons in the game, like gold, and there's different, like, rarity types, and just
There's
like,
at least like three rarities for every weapon in the game for Culve. And Paul, I actually pulled the maximum rarity dual blades in my first run.
yeah, I got them. I got
yeah,
a
man.
rarity. I think I got the same, except it wasn't dual blades, it was for the hunting horn.
That's
So,
awesome. Like, we keep getting each
yeah.
other's weapons, but not our own. Moogles
Yeah, I
in the chat
really want to get a
says-
good switch axe.
Moogles in the chat says that they just finished their 8th run of Culve, and it's so good.
No. I
Eighth?
guess I'm getting on tonight.
Like, 8th full run, like, start to finish, that's amazing.
That sounds like something I'm gonna be doing tonight.
If you're a fan of Monster Hunter and you've been playing World, this quest actually goes until May 3rd, so you have plenty of time. I think the one thing that we weren't sure about is if, like, we stopped playing for the day and we came back the next day, if our pursuit level will have remained the same, like if it hadn't been touched by anybody. I still don't have a clear answer to that. I imagine it wouldn't change.
Yeah, I don't think it would change, but obviously it's changing for us, given that there is people in that same group that are still working through it, because we're going to jump into that same lobby and we'll just pick up where they're at.
Moogles clarified that they killed Kulve Taroth 8 times. Well, you don't slay Kulve Taroth. At least we didn't. We just broke the horns. If you can do that, then we've got a little more work to do.
Yeah, if you can kill Koltaroth, I want to do that.
I
We'll have to
remember
wait a
just
couple more runs, but
when you're playing too, especially like in that first time that we managed to succeed in the quest, and we were like, all 3 of us were just trying to break Kulve's horns, and then that dastardly message appeared on the screen: Kulve Taroth will leave the locale soon. No, you won't.
Oh, also the amount of, like, wedge beetles that exist within that hunting ground is, like, absurd.
Yeah.
Like, you can essentially be Spider-Man.
There's got to be like 15 or 20 of them just scattered around that first area.
Right.
It's a super cool quest. Definitely play it. I definitely intend on playing more of it. Capcom, you're doing a great job. That is one of the coolest quests in Monster Hunter history, bar none. I think the only other like super cool quest after that was that Chameleos quest you do in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, where you're not allowed to bring items with you and you have to forage the land. That was amazing. Moogles is saying the siege will end after an hour of nobody queuing for Kulve, or when you break her horns. Okay. So if no one plays it for an hour, it resets. So good to know. I'll mention this briefly. My wife has been playing through Kingdom Hearts, just slowly trudging through it. And I know
and then you came in, you swept in at the end for all the glory, didn't you?
Well, she has difficulty with the boss battles, and I was warned that a couple of the last boss battles in Kingdom Hearts are just absurdly difficult for some reason. I didn't necessarily think that when I played it. I did have trouble like with the the last time you battle the Riku version of whatever his name is, Ansem.
I saw that. Oh, I was gonna say that last battle you do against just Riku. Like I've saw that cutscene so many times because I kept dying.
Yeah, you do it in the castle. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, then we're on the same page.
That was a harder battle to me than the 2 battles that came afterwards.
That last battle wasn't hard. It was just long because they just kept adding segments to it.
Dream Drop Sora says, I heard Kingdom Hearts. Yes. My wife's been playing through the original game, and I just kind of swooped in and beat the game for her because she had been struggling for a while. And I've wanted to play it for a long time. I've had so much trouble with the first game, but I've moved on to Rechain of Memories, and I'm enjoying that a whole lot more. So I'll have more to talk about with Rechain of Memories probably in the next couple of weeks while I'm not playing God of War. So that's it for Kingdom Hearts. Logan, what have you been up to?
Well, the first game that I want to talk about, I don't want to really talk about it too much because I know Paul bought it too, and I'd like for him to get a little bit of experience before we kind of dive into our feelings about it. You did play it?
I sat down, and what Roger was saying about it was absolutely true because I sat down as soon as I got home to play a couple minutes of it. I blinked, and it was time to start the show.
Right. Yeah.
2 hours just disappeared.
Roger was right.
So the game that we're talking about is Unholy Heights. It is on Switch. I think it might be on the other consoles as well, but we bought it on Switch because we buy everything on Switch nowadays if we can.
It's also on Steam.
Yeah.
Yes. And Unholy Heights is a rent management / like I think Roger
Tower
called
defense,
it like a tower defense, which is
kind of see
kind of true, but it's not. There's no really towers. But you're defending this this apartment complex, right? And I probably put it about in 2 hours as well, and I was just really enjoying myself. It's a really relaxing experience.
Yeah.
It's not like high stress by any means. So if you're looking just for something really, it's $5. It's really cheap. Just really relaxing experience. Unholy Heights.
It's the best $5 I've spent on the eShop so far.
Yeah, it's got a ton of character in it. Like all of like the text descriptions of all the items that you can buy for the rooms are just too good. Roger had mentioned like, like it'll give like status updates of what they're doing. Sometimes it'll say, reading erotic fan fiction. And it's just
talk.
like,
that's amazing.
Yeah, pillow talking. All of a sudden there's like this this notification above one of the doors, and it's like a heart blinking like and really rapidly, and then like a child pops out.
I actually didn't get that far. I never got one child. I keep killing people. I keep sending them to their death.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where I'm really comfortable with like some of the main functionality and just some of the gameplay elements that I'm really starting to think like strategically. Like I'm buying things, and all of a sudden when I buy those things, the tenants are willing to pay more money for rent without having to. I'm always looking at like, how can I, raise my rent and gain more money, right? And then buy other things, and then, this person really sucks at doing this. But then like I could totally get like a better tenant. So like I evict them with the hopes that somebody else who is like a better tenant to defend my complex. I'm like, and I feel kind of bad. But then I stopped feeling bad because then I realized I'm the devil. And I started role playing as the devil, and I'm like, get out of my like apartment complex. I need more money,
Well, all the characters too, like they all have different names and occupations. Like right now I have a pro gamer living in my apartment. I don't want to evict him. I actually had a problem for a while because there was a couple living in one of the apartments, and like they couldn't pay rent. It wasn't until they owed me like $300 that I'm like, okay, I have to let you go. But it's like they kept like just demolishing any enemy that showed up, and so it was really hard because like the payoff was that they were just really strong.
Right.
They don't pay up.
No, it was funny. I've only had that once, and It happened like this. So there was one of my tenants, and they brought a lady back, and they made a baby, and then the parents died, and so the only tenant was the child. And so I evicted the child. I was like, "You're already like 40 gold in debt, man. Like, I'm sorry, this just isn't sustainable."
Got the boot.
I got it.
You're on the
Get him out! Get out, you stupid baby!
Well, honestly, like one of my strategies at certain points, like if someone hasn't paid up, I will just send them to their death. It's like, well, you're gonna fight everything until you're dead.
I will just send them to their death.
This way, you don't have to evict them this way. You know, it's
easier.
It's
Saves you stuff.
It's passive eviction.
Oh man, now I really, really want to play this game. That's awesome. So thank you for the recommendation, Roger.
Yeah, it's so good.
Anything else you played, Logan?
Yeah, so I'm a sucker, and I mentioned this on the discussion briefly, but I'll talk about it a little bit more. I'm a huge fan of Picross, right? And actually, my introduction to Picross was they had that Legend of Zelda Picross game on my Nintendo.
The Twilight Princess one?
The Twilight Princess one for 3DS. And so I went ahead and picked that up because I'm a sucker for puzzles. So Picross is a logic puzzle game. It describes itself as kind of like a numbered crossword puzzle, except instead of filling out the empty spaces with words, it's like you're mapping out a crossword like map, in a certain sense. So they'll give you like numbers on the sides, on the top, and on the side, and you'll have to figure out how those are placed in the rows and columns based on the information that's given you. So, for example, if it is a 10 by 10 square, and say on the leftmost column above it, it's a 10, well, that means every space in that column is going to be filled, right? And then, or maybe you have like a 1 and an 8. Well, that fills up. You're going to have a 1, then you're going to have a space, and then you're going to have 8, and that finishes the column. And then you just use logic to figure out how these are all placed.
Okay.
So it harkens, like if you're a big fan of Sudoku, it gives me Sudoku feels. Yeah. And I'm a big fan. It's $8 on the eShop. I think it also, again, is on probably Steam and PS4 and Xbox One, but I bought it on Switch because, again, it's one of those games where you can just sit down and you can knock out a puzzle in less than 5 minutes and then just turn it off and do something else. Sometimes I'll just get on there and do a puzzle or two, and then I'll go and play another game, But I think the first day I got it, I probably sat down for maybe like 3 or 4 hours and just, played a bunch of puzzles. And this was like in between me playing. I totally forgot another game. And that's going to lead into this. While I was playing the Talos Principle, another fantastic narrative-driven puzzle game. Reminds me of Portal in a lot of ways, without the portals.
Okay.
It's got a lot of wit, and there tends to be some philosophical questions that are proposed to the player. Brief description: it is you take your avatar is an android, and it's in this simulation of sorts, and you're just trying to figure out what happened. Why does this simulation exist? You get all these logs of humans who were building this simulation because it was the end of the world and they wanted to leave something behind, to leave the legacy of humanity, even though humanity itself was doomed. And so I had gotten pretty near the end of the game quite a while ago, but I was like, man, I really need to revisit this and just finish it up. And so I went hard on it, and I finally finished it. I'm so glad I did, because it was like such a weight off my shoulders. I'm like, finally, I've completed the experience. There's this final cut scene that's pretty. It's really pretty, and it was a good game. I was thinking like a give it like a solid 8. You know, it was like a super enjoyable experience. A little bit pricier. It goes up to the base price is $40.
That's pretty steep.
Yeah, but it was on sale, I believe, on the Humble store for $8.
That's a good price.
That might still be on sale. Don't quote me on that, but if you want to check, I'd go on the Humble store, go on Steam. It goes on sale pretty frequently. So I think I got it on sale, or maybe I got it in the Humble bundle or something like that. But totally, if it's $8, totally worth the $8. So that's the Talos principle.
Awesome. And I think that leaves you, Paul.
It's still $8. Sorry, I just wanted to look that up.
$8.
So, like I've mentioned twice before, I was snowed in this weekend. This is why I got so much done. I finished Uncharted. I beat Uncharted 2, and then I'm 3/4 of the way through Uncharted 3.
You've been busy.
Yeah, I've been very busy. Uncharted was kind of a chore to get through, but I do, now that I'm done with it and into Uncharted, and through Uncharted 2, like, I see the value of it. I do see, having more time with Nathan and Elena, it really changes, like, especially Elena, like, her introduction in 2.
Yeah.
And how I've, like, viewed it, because it gave me a lot more context I wouldn't have gotten going into it.
It's so important. Like, if it weren't for that, I would have just told you to straight up just skip the first Uncharted game. Yeah.
And so I do appreciate that I made it through that, though it was just a difficult game.
Before you move on, I do want to point out Dream Drop Sora again. The Talos Principle is definitely a great one. What's funny is that the developers added an anti-piracy measure where the game boots up, but the player can't complete the first level without an elevator. I love like goofy stuff like that.
I do want to mention, for all you VR fanatics, they ported the game to VR platforms. It's a separate title. It's a little bit more. Actually, it looks like it's the same price, but it's also on sale for $20. But it also includes all the DLC with that.
Sweet.
Right on.
Throw it in your corner again, Paul.
So Uncharted 2 was the exact opposite experience of Uncharted 1.
I'm so glad.
I enjoyed it from point A to point B. Like, they made the right changes to that, and it just made the experience. Definitely validated playing through 1 and just having the collection as a whole. I'm mixed on 3 so far. There's certain, like, parts of the game that reminded me of Uncharted, and then the majority of it reminds me of Uncharted 2. A lot of the narrative of it, though, I think is stronger. There's a lot of really good scenes in that game that balance out my opinions of it.
Is Uncharted 2 the one where you have like an unlikely relationship with a guy who can't speak your language, and you just you co-op like through this ice dungeon? That's one of my favorite segments in that game, because I felt so connected to him, even though I had no idea what he was saying.
My favorite thing about 2 is that there weren't zombies.
Yeah, that too.
You'd have to go into a dark, narrow hallway full of zombies.
There's a lot of poop spitting in the chat right now on Twitch. There's some fireball pooping and some flower pooping.
We like to keep it lively here at the Break Room Arcade.
I pooped before the show started. Yeah, Uncharted 2 is like a night and day difference, like between that and the first game. It's almost like, Uncharted almost feels like the alpha version of Uncharted 2. It's just like they hadn't figured it out yet.
Absolutely. Like, absolutely.
And the thing is, like, Uncharted 1 is critically acclaimed.
I can see where it gets it to a degree. I think it's very easy to like mix up what's wrong with it as being just hard.
Logan, can you post the Twitch chat link in the YouTube chat and the vice versa real quick?
Yeah, I will do that. Just talking about, the first Uncharted though, like, in retrospect, it kind of gets pooed on. But at the same time, like,
It's an important game.
Yeah, the Uncharted series did a lot for, game presentation and storytelling, in modern games. And that started with the first game. And so obviously it's easy to make changes and improvements to a singular formula, but building the formula itself, that's a lot of legwork. I think we'll honestly kind of see the same thing for the successor to Breath of the Wild. I think the successor will happen, and all of a sudden we'll look at Breath of the Wild and they're like, oh, look at all these problems with the game. But the new game will not have been possible if it were not for Breath of the Wild,
Right.
and the amount of innovation they have.
We have to look at Uncharted as a stepping stone to Uncharted 2, and Breath of the Wild would be the stepping stone to what comes after that. Ocarina of Time was a stepping stone for even a lot of other games outside of just that. So like Uncharted 2 couldn't exist without Uncharted 1, so we can't forget that. Like, I've said how I felt about the first Kingdom Hearts game, and I recognize that was the first game, and those games afterwards couldn't exist without that first game. They had to figure it out, and I would argue that Kingdom Hearts is figured out a lot more than Uncharted is in the first run, but it doesn't change the fact that it's necessary.
Yeah,
you can't expect
absolutely.
a company to just nail it on the first try.
Yeah, like we could not have had Super Mario Odyssey if we did not have Super Mario 64 at first. Everybody looks at Super Mario 64, and yeah, that game has some rough edges on it. But that game was so far ahead of any other 3D game at that point, and did a lot of things right. Same with Ocarina of Time.
Oh, thank you, Pink
gaming-
Villager, for subscribing.
Yeah, 3D gaming just wouldn't have been the same without those games. And I probably would say narrative as well. I mean, you see that in the DNA in a lot of modern games. I mean, I don't think God of War would look as good if we didn't have Uncharted. I mean, that may be untrue, but it seems like a good hypothesis. And
I don't think God of War would look as good if we didn't have Super Mario 64. That's
ultimately, that's
true.
Absolutely true.
I mean,
Also,
it's a lot of stepping stones, and you can see how 3D gaming has evolved to get from that to the other.
Absolutely.
Everything
Uncharted is
iterates
another
on
step
something
there.
else.
Yeah.
That actually brings us into the topic coming next, which is a little bit of comparison between Uncharted and Tomb Raider. Also, you guys in that Twitch chat,
Are they still pooping?
There's so much poop going on in there. I love it.
The first thought, like, I think you really put my thoughts together when you said that, like, Uncharted feels like a alpha version of Uncharted 2. I kind of feel like the combat system in Uncharted is the alpha version of Tomb Raider's combat system.
Yeah, I can see
I can't speak from 4 because I just got 4 in the mail.
4 is a different beast.
Hey, whoa! That didn't look like the box art to 4.
Because it's the reversible cover. I want it to look beautiful on my desk here. That's so long and drawn out. But I think, like, moving forward for Tomb Raider, I want to see more Uncharted in there. In that, like, I want more of those puzzles.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
want more of that exploration and less of the, well, not necessarily less of the combat, but more puzzles.
I think Uncharted could do with more puzzles, honestly. But I'm just like puzzles.
It has more puzzles than Tomb Raider. I mean, Tomb Raider does have a lot of optional stuff, and if you weigh that in, it probably is a little bit heavier on the puzzle side for Tomb Raider. But the way that puzzles are integrated into the base experience in Uncharted, I think, is much better.
You have to go through those puzzles to get through Uncharted.
Yeah.
You don't have to do the puzzles to get through Tomb Raider. It helps. You learn a lot of, like, combat moves and whatnot by exploring, but it's not necessary. And that I definitely think that's the way they need to go. Less, like, focused on the overall story, but kind of how you navigate things instead of just running from combat to combat to combat. I gotta say, I do want more of that in Uncharted 2 because certain points it just feels like combat. But I'll just like exploring. I want more connecting those combat sequences instead of just like going from combat to combat.
Yeah, no, I feel that. No, I'm really just, I want you to play Uncharted 4 now, because there's aspects of this conversation we can't have yet.
Yeah, how far are you into Uncharted 3?
I'm 3/4 of the way. So
okay.
I'm going to finish that before next week. I'm going to finish that before I allow myself to either play God of War or Uncharted 4.
Yeah.
I'm having the struggle bus right now of which one do I play next? Because offhand, like I kind of want a break from Uncharted because I just like breezed through 3 of them. And so it'd be nice just to get that little bit of a refresher in God of War. I think I'll start God of War this weekend, and I'll probably take a break after, maybe 5-10 hours, and then go through Uncharted and then jump back.
I think that's a good way, because Uncharted 4, there's a decent time skip in there.
Yeah. I was really planning on buying Detroit Become Human, but after the reviews came out for God of War, like that might end up taking priority over Detroit Become Human.
You're going to buy Detroit Become Human, but then you decide to buy Breath of the Wild again. And I respect that decision.
As long as I can get like the collector's edition or something like that,
It was worth it. I actually just had a discussion today about how glad I was that I bought the collector's edition because it came with the soundtrack. I had a whole conversation today about how beautiful Breath of the Wild soundtrack was.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
And underappreciated.
Yeah, I think it's so drastically like different from the other games that people are like, this isn't Zelda. How dare you do that to Zelda?
One of the points that was made in our conversation was like how terrifying the Guardian theme is, and how you hear that and you just freak out.
It reminds me of the Devil Joe theme, actually, because it evokes the same feelings in me. I mean, not so much with the Guardians anymore, because once you're end game, they're kind of nothing.
Well, I would say that same thing about Devil Joe, at least in the earlier games. Like, you get to a point where he's not that big of a deal.
Well, we got rickety wrecked by a tempered Devil Joe in Monster Hunter World.
That's a different beast.
A different beast. Well, you know what, guys? I think that's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Breakdown Podcast. I want to thank you guys for joining. Thank you again to Dream Drop Sora for the donation. We really appreciate that. Thank you for the new subscribers. We definitely enjoy having you guys on the show. If you missed it yesterday, we did an extra early, extra spicy Nintendo at E3 prediction show with Rogers Base. You can find the VOD for that on the channel right now if you check it out at the Break Room Arcade on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Leave us a like and share and comment. It really helps us out. If you're watching on Twitch, please leave us a follow and head over here to YouTube and subscribe too if you'd like, because we'd really appreciate that. You can find all of these episodes in audio form on all your favorite podcast services. They go live on Mondays. Paul's the magic wizard man who makes all that possible. And we definitely want you guys to get in the Discord. If you go to our website, breakroomarcade.com, you'll find a link to our Discord channel. Definitely get in there. Logan also posted them in the chat for you, direct invite links. You can talk to us in there, and if you
leave me recommendations.
Yeah, leave your recommendations. We'll talk about some stuff on the show. We'll integrate chat integration at some point, and I'll work on that. But you might hear what you have to say on the show sometime, and that'd be cool for everyone. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Anything else I left out? Was pretty thorough that time. Follow us on Twitter. I'm at BabaBabs. Logan's at LoggyDubs. Paul's at Gunnysaurus. You can follow us as a collective at the Break Room Arcade, or at Break Room Arcade. Dream Drop Sora says, "See you guys. Glad I became a fan. Shout out to Roger Space." Yep. Shout out to Roger. I'm a pirate, says Wizard. Yep. We're Mammoth Boys here on this show. Yeah. Follow us on Facebook as well. I want to thank you guys for watching. It's been great tonight. We had a good turnout today.
Yeah.
So, as usual, don't break your backs. Break in the games, but for now, break time's over.